Hello readers and welcome to Tell Between Tales. Today we are going to dive into Wind and Truth because there's just so much to talk about. I couldn't just do one spoiler review video for this one. No, we find ourselves needing to do a day by day in-depth spoiler review. These are I'm going to kind of use as bonus episodes and release them alongside my normal Wednesday release probably on Fridays, and we'll see how fast I can get through them. But I've got the first couple ready to go, and then we'll see how long it takes. But there's a lot to talk about, and I love the story of the Stormlight Archive, so we're just going to dissect this book because this is what BookTube is for. All right, so we're going to start with the prologue and day one in this video. And the prologue, oh my goodness, I was so excited that it was from Gavilar's perspective. Oh, and I should also say that I am going to be talking full spoilers about the book. This isn't like just day one spoilers. I will be connecting anything that I see like throughout day one and talking about how it interacts with like maybe day 7 or 8 or other reveals in the book. So if you've only read day one, maybe come back to this later. Right. So Gavilar's perspective, I was just so excited saying, yes, finally we get some answers. And the first big reveal is like, what? He's talking to the Stormfather. The Stormfather chose him first to show the visions to, and he was trying to bond with the Stormfather. At least he talks about he was trying to find the right words. That really wasn't his ultimate goal, right? He really wanted to become a herald, and he wanted to do it for super selfish reasons. I mean, he didn't care about the people, and you can see that it's evident when he says, oh, I'll just break. I'm not going to be tortured. I'm just going to break and come back. That way I can lead everyone. And the Stormfather's like, what? Which is a pretty good reaction, because like, what are you talking about? You're insane. This is not the purpose. And it also demonstrates his arrogance because, you know, he's got a pretty close relationship with Kalek, who is the leader of the Sons of Honor, and they're trying to bring back the Desolations so that way the Radiant powers will also come back. And Gavilar is like blind to the fact that he's actually a real herald, which just really shows you how arrogant Gavilar really was, and everybody just held him up to this really high standard. You go through 4 books of reading about how amazing Gavilar was, and you really don't know, oh, is this a good thing that he died? Or maybe this was a bad thing that he died. Maybe he was actually onto something and he shouldn't have been stopped. But you really find out in this one that, yeah, he really needed to go. And Dalinar, like that event just helped Dalinar become such a better person. And it's so sad too to see that the phrase that Dalinar really latched onto, he's like, oh, my brother told me to follow the codes and I didn't, and this is what happened, and I will never again not follow the codes. Like, it really launched him to hold true to his honor and to the codes. And that phrase, when Gavilar told him, it was just a jibe. He was just trying to get Dalinar to get drunk. He was doing it to hurt him for the purpose of getting Dalinar drunk to get him out of there, because he was really kind of secretly afraid of Dalinar, and he didn't respect his brother at all. And he knew, of course, Dalinar's secret about killing his wife Evie, and so that just broke my heart to see that. I was like, oh, I love Dalinar. He's all the characters are great, but Dalinar's definitely up there. He's one of my favorites. And then when you see Thydakar coming in, it really demonstrates how little Gavilar actually knows about the Cosmere and about the events in the other worlds, because he doesn't know what a Scion is. He doesn't know about what the spike through his eye is, and I won't say too much about that because that's Mistborn Era 2 spoilers. And it really showcased just how ignorant and selfish he was, and he was way in over his head. And he would never have figured out the words, the I will unite, in order to bond the Stormfather and become a Radiant or a Bondsmith. He never would have figured that out because he didn't want to unite. And even if he did figure them out, the words would not have been accepted because he didn't want, he wanted in a way that maybe Taravangian wanted to unite, right? It wasn't for good purposes. It was more for nefarious purposes. And then something that I discovered as I was looking back through here that I didn't catch the first time was that the Stormfather has like this freak out moment where he says, oh, a herald has died, a herald has died. And we now know that that was Chana, which is Shallan's mom. So Shallan killed her mother, which sent her back to Braze, and then Chana was the one who broke and allowed the return. So even though this whole time we've been thinking that Talm was the one who broke, he never did. He never broke. It was Chana who broke, and she held out for what, like a decade, I think. And then she broke. That was something that I noticed at the beginning, that you get that right there. Oh, a herald has died. And then seeing that when Gavilar is dying and he's talking to the Stormfather, not to Seth, that makes a lot more sense. And then finally we understand what he was saying when he said the words, you have to find the most important words a man can say. He was talking about the radiant oaths and the words that needed to be found in order to bond to a Spren, or in this case, the Stormfather, to gain that power. And I think that it's really interesting how the most important words a man can say for Dalinar was different than the most important words a man can say for Gavilar. And for Dalinar, it was, I will do better. His is a story about progression and becoming better over time and learning from your mistakes. Whereas Gavilar's was just, I want power and I want it now and give it to me, which really is the story of his life of uniting Alethkar. Was just all about gaining power over the whole kingdom. And so going into day one, there's a lot of setup in day one. I think day one and even day two, there are really our big setup chapters, but I did like how it picks up right after the events of Rhythm of War, and that it's nice that it starts with Kaladin, and Kaladin finally has a moment of peace, which he just deserves so much. And I really liked the quotes at the beginning about Kaladin and his mental state, where he talks about, I'm not all the way better, but for today, I'll settle for fine. And the idea of, I think it'll be easier to remember this time when I have bad days, that days like this exist too, that even though there are bad days and my mind goes into this depressive state and everything is bleak, I have to remember that that's only temporary and that there are good days too, which I think is human nature. We tend to really just focus a lot on the negative, and we focus a lot on the here and now and what we're currently going through. And it can be hard to see that what we're currently experiencing is not going to last forever. And I think that's the point that Kaladin has finally realized, is that I might be having these bad days, but it's not going to last forever. There is light at the end of the tunnel. We also hear the wind for the first time, which then of course brings in the title, Knights of Wind and Truth, or it's just called Winds and Truth. Wind and Truth, not the Knights of Wind and Truth, which end up being Kaladin and Seth, with Kaladin, of course, being the Knight of the Wind. The wind speaks to him, the wind chooses him as his champion, and we start to learn about wind and night and stone as the three kind of original gods of Roshar left over from Adonalsium, and that their voices have really been shoved to the background since the fall of Adonalsium and the arrival of honor and cultivation, and then eventually Odium. And somehow the changing of Odium's vessel allows the wind to speak again. That's never really fully explained, but okay. And I feel like we get a lot more buildup than is kind of deserved. Like, we get this whole conversation with Wit and Kaladin, and I guess that Wit doesn't really know that Kaladin's ultimately going to become a herald, but I feel like there is so much buildup in this chapter. Like, yeah, I was buckling up for some pretty intense, serious stuff to go down. I was like, Callan is gonna die. It's gonna happen. Like after reading this, I was like, it's gonna be epic, and there's gonna be some like epic battle. Something's gonna really go down where Kaladin is headed, and it's gonna be. I mean, and in a lot of ways, it is unexpected, and it is a pretty big event. I mean, Seth has to really, they're fighting Ishar and his corruptive creations of the honor bearers. But it wasn't as all encompassing and foreboding as I thought it was going to be. And then, they're like, oh, you're going to have to, I'm sorry. The wind keeps saying, I'm sorry, that you have to do this. And then the event ended up being that Kaladin has to step in and become a herald and take Jezreel's place. And I was like, I kind of feel like that was maybe built up quite a bit too much, because it really is a natural progression for Kaladin's story, being the protector, being the one who wants to protect people, being the one who's going to fight so that others don't have to. It is his natural next step, and it made a lot of sense to me that he would just be like, okay, this needs to be done. This is what we're going to do. I'm going to do it, because this is how we're going to protect the most people. And that was a little bit of maybe a tangent. And we get some good wit moments with his philosophies of passion versus virtue. And I think he makes some really good points in there. I like the philosophical stuff. I think that's really fun to think about with, how does passion serve you versus how does a virtue serve you? What is the difference between the two? And if a virtue is tested and then it fails, was it really a virtue in the first place? And how, passion can only take you so far. And then of course we get Kaladin saying goodbye to everybody. And we know that it's going to be final. Wit says that he's not going to come back. Of course, we don't expect that he's not like ever going to come back. Of course, not in the way that it's done. I thought he was going to die. I think a lot of us thought he was going to die. And in a way, he kind of does die. They find his body, but he's reborn, right? Naturally. I love how Scar tosses the spears out the window. That was hilarious. Scar is a great character. And I love all of Bridge 4. I mean, how can you not love Bridge 4? You've been with them for so long, and so every time one of them is taken from you, it hurts. It's personal. And why is Moash not dead? I know that's not in this day, but I'm going to put that in there. Like, I wanted one thing out of this book, and that was for Moash to die. And it didn't happen. So, not happy. And then jumping over to Shallan, we get Shallan now has 2 Spren, and she's bonded to both Spren, and she has her armor. And that was like, oh, accepting that truth allowed her to have her armor. She definitely has further to go. I think that was a good progression for her, because her story needs to move on, and that was all well and good. I love her armor Spren. They're like those little soot balls in that movie Spirited Away. They're just so fun and bouncy. That was pretty fun. They're great. I really liked the discussion with the Deadeyes, and I'm glad that he did something with the Deadeyes in this book. I was worried that this was going to be more of a long-term plot thread, that they were going to figure out how to heal the Deadeyes later down the road. So I'm glad that was resolved in this book, and we can talk about that further on in like day 9 or whenever. Shallan also has some really great quotes in there about how healing is a process. It's not a one-time event. It's something that takes time, and how strength can be a matter of perception sometimes. And Shallan has found that today she can choose strength. There's a lot of focus on Ba'ato Mishram, which is a good setup. We know that from here, their whole story is going to be about finding the prison. And then, of course, she gets released at the end. And we don't know what the full ramifications of that are going to be. But there are definitely some good things about that, with it healing the Deadeyes. And it's set up in this chapter where it talks about how the release, it says there were no Deadeyes before Ba'ato Mishram was bound. And then after she was, there were. And then I liked her conversation with Notam as well, which is you don't have to form a bond. There are other ways to be useful, and just not allowing yourself to be forced and pushed into making certain choices and decisions by peer pressure, basically. And I loved the music spread. I loved the pictures and that sweet moment that Adolin has with his horse and with Shoreblood. And of course, Nightblood is in full form. I love Nightblood throughout this whole book. And Seth is like, I hunger for something I cannot describe. Pancakes? Seth, I think it's pancakes. It's not pancakes. Oh, can I have your pancakes? It's great. I mean, he has like the best humor in the whole book, and I pretty much love every line. And I think it's just crazy that even Nightblood, who is a sentient sword, even he can grow in this book. And he's been one way for so long. He makes some significant self-control leaps, and that he can learn how to control himself even once he's been drawn. I really just love everything about Nightblood. And then we have to take a second to talk about how it was kind of weird when Kaladin is saying goodbye to Shallan and Adolin, how Kaladin is reflecting how Shallan chose Adolin over him, and how he's like, oh, I'm not hurt by that. I'm actually really glad that they ended up together. And I'm kind of thinking, and he actually says, oh, she rejected my advances. I'm thinking, what advances? You never made any advances. You like fought these feelings of attraction the entire time because she was light eyes and you didn't want to have anything to do with her. You were not happy that you kind of had these feelings for her. It's like they shared one intimate experience in the chasms. And then after that, they kind of like glanced at each other and gave each other weird looks. And Shallan kind of stared at him for a while, and they were super awkward around each other. And he never made any advances. He never actually tried to go after her and say, hey, I like you. I want to have a relationship with you. He never did any of that. And so it was really weird that Sanderson wrote in that Kaladin's reflecting like, oh, I'm fine that she didn't choose me. And you're like, well, I mean, it was never really a thing anyway. Like maybe Shallan was like, yeah, I'm attracted to you, but she never told you and you never told her. And I don't know. It was weird. It was weird. That's like the one part that I thought was strange about day one. But as far as the interludes go, the first interlude was great. I was like, what? The Scion is the spy? Scions are Ghostbloods too. Oh, it was crazy. And so now the Ghostbloods know where Bahato Mishram's prison is. And so you know they're going to go and mess everything up, which they do. And then, of course, we get to see Odium, and he's still torn between his two different sides and philosophies. And every single time in these interludes, like for the first several interludes, I'm like, oh, he's going to pull back and he's going to relent and realize that what he's doing is wrong. And then it never happens. And he just kind of finds more ways to justify his actions and what he wants, and kind of aligns more and becoming in sync with his power. But in this section, you get a lot about what is the best way to make humanity grow and how much freedom can they really have for maximum potential and maximum growth. And so he really wants to limit their freedoms, where instead of allowing people to have full choice over their actions, he wants to take that away and say, oh no, you only have limited choice that I get to choose for a prescribed maximum amount of human growth, which is a really interesting idea. And I think what we're seeing here is a little bit of a callback to his LDS roots, because the idea of agency and someone wanting to limit that agency is a deeply rooted LDS doctrine, whereas we believe everybody has a God-given right to their agency. It is a gift that God gave to everybody. And the reason why Satan was cast out of heaven was because he rebelled against this plan. He wanted to take away that agency from everybody and say, okay, everybody is going to come back to heaven because I am going to force them to choose the right. And this feels to me like Sanderson's kind of drawing on that a little bit and saying, oh, Odium in this is a little bit more like Satan, because he is going to force everybody to choose a certain way and limit their freedoms in order to make a desired outcome. And then with that perspective in mind, like, you know, Odium he's always been the bad guy, but He's really the bad guy. And so those are my thoughts for day one. Let me know what your thoughts for day one are in the comments below. I'd love to hear them. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in day two. Bye.